Hi, welcome back to Classic Guitar Rock. I'm Jeremy, and I want to do our next installment in albums you should own. And this talk about my last video about KK Downing just made me pull this one off the shelf. I'm talking British Steel by Judas Priest. Again, if you can only have one Priest album, and that would be terrible to be in that situation, right? If someone passed a decree that you could only have one Priest album, this would probably be the one I'd get. I was first exposed to Judas Priest probably in about 1980, 81, somewhere around there. And a friend of mine, his older brother, left a cassette in my brother's car, and we were listening to it. And I was really digging it. And I found out, I popped the cassette out, and it was the album Hellbent for Leather. And the song Evening Star in particular, I remember really liking that. But I just really liked that album. And I rushed out over the next week or so with my allowance money to the record store, and I found Hellbent for Leather. In England, it's called Killing Machine. But the U.S. version is called Hellbent for Leather. I found Hellbent for Leather, and I also found this one. And I bought them both. And that began my love of Judas Priest, right? Now, I got to be honest. I started with those two, and then shortly after that, Screaming for Vengeance came out. It was released, and I went out and bought that and really liked that. And from there, I went back in and, filled in the blanks, right? I went back and got Rockarola and Sad Wings of Destiny, filled it all in. And as much as I love them, guys, I said this on the last video, I never left Judas Priest. They left me, right? I love it up through Defenders of the Faith. I didn't like as much as Screaming for Vengeance, but that was in my mind, the last great Judas Priest album. And I could not do Turbo and Ram It Down, and I couldn't do it, right? And sorry if you like the later Priest. That's awesome. That's great. It wasn't my cup of tea anymore after this. But let's talk about this album. Let's talk about British Steel. Came out in 1980. It's still in the plastic wrap. I'm going to very carefully peel this back a little bit just to look at it. Came out in 1980, and if you were looking at eras of Priest, right? We've got what we call classic Priest. And this begins a transition. I would still consider this part of the classic Priest catalog. And I would call Screaming for Vengeance the beginning of the more modern Priest, which leaves us a funky little album in between called Point of Entry. I actually have a video that I posted a couple years ago on Point of Entry. Controversial album. Check out that video. I personally love Point of Entry. I think it's a great album, very underrated. But this, to me, is kind of the end of the classic Priest, which is my favorite era of the band. And it's just great. To call it heavy metal, that term heavy metal has morphed. And bands that call themselves metal now, to me, a lot of it's just noise and I can't listen to it, right? But this was, in its day, this was the top of the heavy metal heap, right? Judas Priest, and then right on their tails was Iron Maiden. To me, that's heavy metal, right? Black Sabbath kind of started it, but these guys really took what Black Sabbath started and made it a look, right? There was a heavy metal look. There was just a style, and Judas Priest was it. Of course, you got Rob Halford, who's just an incredible vocalist, awesome. And you've got Glenn Tipton and KK Downing, Ian Hill, Dave Holland, I think. Yeah, Dave Holland is drumming on this. Just solid metal. And here's the difference, right? And here's where thrash metal, and that's why the later Priest doesn't do it for me, right? This stuff had dynamics, and I don't want to get too nerdy, right? But what makes a song great, I think, is dynamics, is space. Not just being so fast and driving that there's no dynamics, that it's just a wall of noise, right? But a song, for instance, The Rage. Man, that is just a killer song. Go listen to The Rage if you've never listened to it. You can find, actually, there's a video of them playing it live recently. Priest did a tour where they played this album in its entirety. So go back and check out songs like The Rage, Metal Gods. Man, if you have to pick one great metal song, Metal Gods is it. Grinder. There's some cheese on here. You know, as I listened to it yesterday, United, kind of cheesy. I mean, it's a good song, but it's kind of cheesy. Breaking the Law, a good song, but one that has become so pedestrian. Everyone's heard that song, right? It's in a State Farm commercial now. But in 1980, that was a pretty cool song, right? One of the first Judas Priest song I ever learned on guitar was Grinder from this album. Dun, 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 dun. And of course, the reason I learned it was it sounded easy, right? And it was pretty easy. But this is just, man, you got to have this album. One of the great stories is, as they were recording Metal Gods, there's the sound of like marching in the streets, and there's this kind of grindy marching sound. Like it sounds like, you know, I'm dragging iron feet, right? It's heavy metal feet marching. Well, the way they recorded that is they went into this studio for whatever reason. In England, this is just a British thing, I guess. There's lots of recording studios in these old castles and mansions and stuff. So they go in and they find a bunch of the silver service, you know, the silverware, the forks and spoons. And so they've all got like boxes of silverware that they're rattling and shaking around to make that noise. There's also for one part, they recorded a microphone cable being smacked on a guitar case or something, and they add reverb and stuff to that to make this big, loud, cracking sound. But just a great album, man. It makes me laugh just thinking of this album because I have so many memories. This is the album back in the day when you had your turntable, right, with the little arm, you could stack up like 5 records on top of each other, right? Man, I'd have my Judas Priest stack. I'd have Hellbent for Leather and British Steel and Point of Entry. They'd all be stacked up, and so when I'd go to bed at night, I'd listen to all of those records. And this is the album. Again, if you can only have Priest album, which would be a sad world if you could only have one. But if you could only have one Priest album, this is the one. Okay, British Steel by Judas Priest from 1980. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Thanks. Bye-bye.